Hi, I'm Sheila Layton. Welcome to the Beyond Coincidence Show, where every moment holds a miracle and we talk about seeing the hand of God in our lives. Call it a God wink or a tender mercy or whatever you want. Everyone on this show has seen the hand of God or their higher power in their lives in a very real and personal way. Welcome, everyone. I have another great guest with me today. In fact, she is the mother of my original editor, Jacob. So Kathy was raised in Southern California and then moved to Utah in her teen years. She has a big blended family that includes 9 children and 17 grandchildren. She began college in her 30s while working in the corporate world, and then, upon completion of her master's degree, she became a therapist specializing in trauma and sexual addiction. She is the owner of Therapy Utah, Sarasette Lehigh, and co-owner of Align EQ. She has been an avid reader her whole life. Libraries, bookstores, time with her family are her happy places. She has always known that angels surround us and that the Lord is in the details of our lives. Welcome, Kathy.
Nice to be here.
I'm so happy to meet you and to put a face to a name and all the things.
Yes, it's great to be here.
Yes, I appreciate you. I know that you're busy with all your businesses and things. But tell me a little bit about, just take a few minutes. What does life look like today for you?
Well, I started a doctoral program, and that is exciting to me. And so add that on to what my clinic, Therapy Utah, that keeps me busy with mostly training. The role I'm in now is training these new clinicians. And so that keeps me busy. And then Align EQ is another startup that we're excited about. And Sarasette Lehigh is a franchise that I'm passionate about that technology. And so I feel like I'm squeezing in grandkids with all of that and trying to enjoy. I call these my legacy years. It's the years you give back, And so,
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
that's fantastic. I can understand that.
Yeah.
Grandkids is a fun thing and
Oh,
keeps you busy, and but we also need to make sure that we do things that we also love and
yep.
develop our own other interests, right? So that's
Yep.
fantastic. So tell me, Kathy, what was like growing up in your home? How many siblings? What number were you? Did religion play a part? And how did you develop a relationship with God?
Grew up in, I was the youngest. I have 2 older brothers. I was adopted, and I was raised Catholic, and my parents they were just 2 good people. Right was right, wrong was wrong. They raised us to believe you work hard, honor your last name, all of the good stuff that parents can teach you. I would say they kind of struggled with emotions. We were not a family that emoted or even knew how to. So that was missing quite a bit, but really they.
I feel like for parents that were born maybe in the 1930s or whatever,
Mhm.
I think that's
Yep.
pretty typical. That emotion, they
Mhm.
just didn't say "I love you." They didn't
Yeah.
hug their kids, just the way
Yep.
culturally that's the way it was, right?
Right. And my dad, he was a meat cutter. He was blue collar, and my mom stayed at home. And yeah, it was just that generation. Love looked different, but it was there.
And you grew up in Southern California.
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah.
So you said you grew up Catholic. Did that mean you went to church regularly? Did catechism or just Christmas and Easter?
Yep, I went through catechism and we went to mass fairly regularly. My dad had one day off a week, so he liked to fish on the pier. And so sometimes Sunday was fishing on the pier, which was great because back in that day, I would just play on the beach. I was alone on the beach playing, but it was my little world, the water was safe to me and I loved it. So we were fairly regular attendees at mass, but sometimes it was Saturday night mass.
Right, which is nice. I mean, you still went. So both mom and dad would go with you guys.
Right. Yep.
All right. So was there talk of religion in the home, or was it just when you went to church?
On occasion, I would say we did the rosary where you kneel as a family and you recite the prayers, the Hail Mary prayer and the Our Father prayer. And so when something was particularly troubling my mom, I had an older brother that got into a lot of trouble. And so oftentimes we were doing the rosary. And so I really was bothered every time he did something dumb. It made me be on my knees doing these prayers. And so, and certainly it's a beautiful prayer and a beautiful Catholic tradition. But as a young kid, it was not fun. And we went to confession, we had confession that we did. And I had wonderful priests in my life, so that was catechism. We had the nuns teach us and they were fine, a little strict, but
So
gave
did catechism take place like on a weeknight, or when did
it
you
did.
go? Yeah, so it was
Yeah, it
just
was a
a separate little
weeknight.
class that you did, a
Hmm.
religious class. Like our kids go to
Yeah,
seminary, you would go to catechism.
right,
And
right.
was that your whole growing up years from the time you were like 6 till 18?
No, we actually in about when I was about 13 or 14, we had neighbors that belonged to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I remember my dad saying, I could never join a church like that. They're at church all day on Sunday, it was, and he likes to say that, the missionary showed up at his door and he had a beer in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And he says, I don't want any part of that religion. Back during that time, if you were Catholic and divorced, which my parents had both had prior marriages, had both been divorced. And in that day, divorce was really looked upon negatively. That, it was quite a big deal. And you couldn't take the sacrament if you were divorced. And my parents were really
Well, even though
private.
they were remarried. So
Yes.
even if you're remarried in the Catholic Church, you cannot take the
Yeah.
sacrament.
They have changed that now, but back in that time, you couldn't take it. And the wife was deemed as less than for sure. My mom, my grandmother let her know that she was basically an illegitimate wife to my dad because of the previous divorce. So it was, now my mom never did really discuss this much, but it was tough for her. And so in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where they teach of eternal marriages and the eternal family, I know that really drew my parents in. And we ended up having the missionaries come and we converted, and my dad quit smoking and drinking, and my mom drank coffee, and they were social drinkers, so drinking alcohol was a part of their life, but not
Sure.
a big part. But they
How
quit
old were you?
cold
How old were
turkey.
you then when they
I think I
converted?
was about 13 years old.
Okay. And you were still
Yeah.
in California at this time?
Yes, yes, yes. And then our neighbors that had helped us in that conversion, they had moved to Utah, and so my parents, there was a lot going on in California, and my parents thought we should move to Utah. So I moved to Utah just before turning 16.
Well, that's a hard age to move. Leave all your friends.
It was rough. Sheila, of course you can look back now and I can see I just did not have any social skills. I truly, I couldn't say hi to somebody. So that move it was tough. It was tough. I'd always loved school. I'd always loved to learn. I'd always loved reading and not figure out how to fit in this new environment. And my parents wanted me to be happy, so I would lie about having friends. I would say, "Oh yeah," and it was just a lonely, lonely, painful time for me.
That is hard. Did you remain active in the church after you moved to Utah, or did you not have any friends and didn't go?
From the time I was about 16 on, drinking it was my safe place. I didn't have to feel the loneliness and the rejection. And so I didn't stay involved in the church. Yeah, so it really took me down a pretty destructive path for many years, actually. Yeah.
Wow, that is unfortunate. What brought you back then? Like how did you meet your first husband and what brought you back to God? Because I'm assuming for those number of years you just sort of forgot about God and thought I don't need this. I'm having fun and whatever.
Yeah, she, yeah, yeah, I became pregnant with my first daughter, and my husband was not the father of that baby. He knew I was pregnant, but he and I married, and he came from a family that was very hostile towards the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he wasn't. He wasn't. He was neutral on it, and we were so young and so dumb. I mean,
Yeah.
we were
18.
just, I mean, good grief. So we ended up having four children together. We had two right away, and then there's a pretty big gap, and we had I was supposed to get
So you were pregnant with your first one when he married you?
yeah, yep,
Oh wow. I mean
yeah,
that takes a pretty
yeah,
decent guy to want to take on someone else's child.
absolutely. And he never wanted her to feel like she wasn't his. He was very much, very, just, and yeah, as good a dad as two people that were involved in drugs and alcohol could be. He was a good dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At what point did you bring God back into your story then?
I had the ability to know that I could pray. My mom was a prayerful woman. She didn't really pray. Sometimes I would look in her room and see her on her knees. And I thought anyone could pray. I didn't know there were any rules to prayer. Like sometimes you can get into religion and it's like, well, you have to be this, this, and this. For me, I had the ability to know I could reach out to my Lord and he would answer prayers. It didn't draw me into religion. It saved my life sometimes, truly. But I always knew that he was there. I've never had to question, is there a God? For me personally, I've always known there is, and I've always known I could turn to him.
That's a spiritual gift to have
Yeah.
that knowledge, because some people, even if they have religion, still struggle with that. But the
Yes.
fact that you knew that you could pray to him and he'd hear you, that's a spiritual gift that's really beautiful.
Yes. I know that now. I had no idea what a gift it
No.
was, Sheila, then, because I just thought everybody knew they could pray, and then I would hear people say, well, I can't pray because of this. And I'd be like, oh, I never thought I had to get myself right before I prayed. I just have always no. And one time I asked the Lord, I was like, hey, has there been any times that I've really, really missed your hand in my life? And man, he told me a couple of times right away that he was like, you really should have caught these. So
Did those just
he's
come as thoughts to your mind?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been blessed in that way. And my former husband trusted he never questioned it. So I also had somebody that never questioned if I prayed about something or was impressed with something.
He
So
just
that
said,
was
okay, he believed that
yeah,
you had your own inspiration to act on
yeah,
that.
yep.
Would you say then that because of that spiritual gift, that is how you began to develop a relationship with God?
Well, how I developed it, I had that relationship at that level. And then one day I was in my early 30s, so I had my 4 children, and in fact, just super quick, with my third child, I really only wanted 2 children. Then we got pregnant with the third, and I'm like, this is it. I'm done. I'm had it. And I had an epidural with my first two. With my third daughter, I went into labor really quick, so no time for an epidural. And I was not involved in religion at the time. And I give birth to her, and I'm supposed to get my tubes tied 2 weeks later, for after her birth. And in the left hand side, I see all of these spirits in white. There's so many that love her. They just loved her.
And this is in the room immediately after you gave birth to her?
And one of them loved her even more, which is an odd way to say it because the love was so profound. And I was like, that's her brother. And then it took me a minute and I'm like, wait a minute, then that's my son.
So did you have this? She was your third daughter?
Uh-huh. Yes. And
Okay.
so luckily I wrote, my kids all have brown hair and hazel eyes. And I wrote in my journal, I said, I think I have a blonde haired, blue eyed boy that I'm supposed to have. And I didn't want another baby. So I didn't even tell my husband, who wanted more children, because I was like, this can't be happening to me. I finally told him, I said, I think we have another. And my youngest boy, as you know, is the blondest, blue eyed,
Yes.
and he looks nothing like his siblings. But
But you know what? He does look like you.
yeah,
When I met you, I was
yeah.
like, I think it looks just like his mom.
People
That's so
say
cool.
that all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so cool. So
Yeah.
did you tell your husband of the experience you had, or you just said, I think there's another baby?
I told him of the experience, and he didn't really believe in, but like I said, since he always trusted me and he wanted another child too, he was like, I'm in. But man, when I was pregnant with Jake, I was like, this better be a blonde haired, blue eyed boy.
And luckily it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. And so I'm grateful I followed the spirit there and didn't get my tubes tied. And we're
Yes.
all blessed because of that.
So what then brought you back to religion? Like if you said, and you're in your 30s, so it's been 12, 13, 14 years of
Hmm.
you being married and not having religion in your life. What brought you back to religion? I mean, you had a relationship with God, obviously, right? I mean, you were
Hmm.
praying, you were
Hmm.
feeling things and stuff, but what brought you back to actually religion and a deeper relationship?
Well, I received a phone call from the ward secretary. So in our religion, the secretary kind of reaches out to people in the congregation, and I had heard somewhere there was a new bishop. So I thought when a bishop says to come to his office that you have to, like, okay, I'll come in.
Right.
previously, when I was in my early 20s, I had a short spiritual awakening, and I had gone in to a bishop, and he felt like I needed to have what's called a bishop's council, where you come in and share the places on your path that you've gone astray. And then they make a decision. Do you have full membership? Are you excommunicated? Are you maybe disfellowshipped? And I didn't know any of these words. I'd never really been in the religion. So all of a sudden I found myself in this room with 4 men, and I just have to say it didn't go well. It felt it was tough.
Well, sure,
It was
especially
really
because you
tough.
hadn't really even been part of the religion. So why are you
Yeah.
judging me on I have no knowledge? So
Yeah.
what leave me alone.
Yeah, it
That's
was just
interesting.
a tough situation,
But
but
40 years ago,
yeah,
40
and
years ago, they did things very
they
differently
did.
than we do now. And that would never, ever happen today. And
Right.
thankfully, we learn, we grow.
Yep.
People are not perfect. No religion is perfect. The leaders of the religion are just normal people, and they
Yeah.
just do with the knowledge they have, which sometimes is very limited. And so I'm sorry, that's
Right.
unfortunate. That's not
Right.
good.
Well, and so they invited me to leave, and then they invited me back in and said, "We've been praying for 45 minutes. We feel like you need to be excommunicated from the church." Um,
Did you even know
but
what that meant?
No, I didn't have a clue. And they said, "But we keep getting the answer to disfellowship you." And so I was like, okay, I just didn't know. But here's the beauty of what happened is I walked out, and I'm going down the church hall, and I thought that didn't go very well. And the Spirit just enlightened me. The Spirit just said, "Doesn't matter what they think. It's between you and the Lord." And for me, and I can tell you, Sheila, I have a very simple faith. It's just simple. So for me, that revelation was like, oh, that makes sense. Like it just made sense of it. So I just thought,
And
yeah, it's
it's
between me
true.
and the Lord. Yeah,
It's
it's so
so
true.
true. And I've
It's
said that to
so
my
true.
own children. And I was like, guys, your relationship with the Lord is your thing. It's
Mhm.
nobody else's. Our paths are all going to look different. Nobody can judge your relationship with the Lord. That's between you and Him.
Yeah, it just solved it for me. And they said, if you do anything again, you'll certainly get excommunicated. And I went out and did everything again. So I just thought,
Well, it meant
okay.
nothing to you. It meant nothing to you.
Yeah, I didn't have any more contact with nobody had reached out, and I didn't reach out. It was so fast forward about 10 plus years, I get this call, and I think, okay, it's a bishop calling me in, and he called me in, and he started talking to me, and I didn't know they even kept records of what your status was. So I really thought he was going to ask if I'd like to have a job in the church, a volunteer
Like
position
a
in the
calling.
church.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, but obviously they do keep records. But so I said, well, I've been disfellowshipped, and I told him a little bit about my story, and he said, "Would you like to come back to church?" And it just hit me, and I just said, "Yes, yes." And from that night, Sheila, I never touched drugs or alcohol again, or coffee, not one time again. From that night, it wasn't just that I didn't touch him, the desire
Wow.
lifted. It lifted from me. It was not even, and my husband at the time, um, and this might not
It's
sound so,
miraculous, though, Kathy. That's the fact that you
yeah,
could stop doing that because, I
yeah.
mean, just coffee alone is
Oh,
a
that was,
addictive
yeah,
habit.
yeah,
Not that it's a bad thing. I mean, most
yeah,
people drink coffee, that's fine. But,
yeah,
for you to be able to stop that and
yeah,
then drinking and drugs and all the things to just boom, done,
yeah.
that's the hand of God right there.
Totally. And, my husband at the time, and your viewers will take this how they will, but he was very supportive in the sense of the kind of alcohol and drugs I liked, he didn't allow in the house anymore. He was like, nobody's going to bring those in. He saw the good that me being involved in the church would bring. And he was as supportive as he could be. I
Yeah.
mean, truly. So the bishop said, he was a brand new bishop, and he said, I've got to talk to the stake president. I don't even know, next steps. So they said to me, he said, hey, we do need to hold another bishop's council. And so I was in. I was like, you bet,
Oh, you
I'm in.
were.
I'm
I'm
gonna
surprised you
go.
didn't have PTSD from the first one.
I know. And here's the thing. I thought it would be like the first one and I didn't care. I was like, I'm coming back no matter what. I'm coming back. And so before it, I just prayed and was fasting and I just said, Heavenly Father, no matter what. And one of the members of the bishopric, his son was a good friend of my oldest boys. And I thought when he hears, these things, he's never going to want his boy to come to my house again. And I thought, whatever it takes, I'm coming back. So I go into the room and we say a prayer, and I don't have the words to describe, but it was like the room was just surrounded by, like, nothing else existed except this room at this moment. And it was so sacred, like the ground became sacred. Wouldn't even have the language at the time to say that word, but it was beautiful and sacred, and
Just
I
peaceful and
just
calm.
absolutely
And you
peaceful.
must have felt love too, right?
Oh, so much love. And I was trying to describe it to my friend later, and she said, Kathy, that's brotherly love. And I had never experienced that in my life, that brotherly love. And so we had the the council, and the individual that was my son's friend's father, it was his turn to share, and he was quiet. And I thought, he's just trying to figure out how to say, look, I don't want you around my boy. And I was just praying for him, like, Heavenly Father, I get it. Let him say whatever he needs to me, because I'm coming back. And he said, I don't know why I'm been really prompted to say this, but you're a really good mom, and my son's been blessed having you in his life. And
Wow.
nobody knew that. The Lord knew that, and nobody else, and
Nobody knew
so
that you were struggling with I'm a
yeah,
crappy mom.
yeah, yeah. And so at the end, the bishop said, normally we need to invite you to leave so that we can talk. And I knew that because they had invited me to leave the last time. And he says, but I feel strongly that we need to let you know that you're a worthy member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so it was my first step, and I had learned as quick as I could learn, like, how to move in this new world of being in a church organization. And I got a calling with little kids, and I had a lot of teaching. Like, I didn't know any stories about prophets, so I was making up stories, and my friend was like, you can't make up stories, what are you doing? So there was a huge learning curve because people thought I knew things, but I knew
You didn't.
nothing. I knew nothing. Yeah. And so, yeah, like my daughter's first testimony, my oldest daughter had always been involved in the church because of my parents. And she stood up and said, I'm glad my mom quit drinking beer and is coming to church. And I'm like,
By now
what
she's probably
is
like
going
14,
on?
right? She's
Yeah.
probably like 14 now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just a singular experience. It was a singular experience. I came back all in.
And that just changed everything.
Yeah, it did. It did, for sure.
That's beautiful. Was there a separate or different experience where you saw the hand of God that you want to share, or was that the experience that you wanted to share?
Actually, I had a different one. I wasn't even thinking about going down that personal story life, but let me,
I appreciate that you did, because that shows, that helps us understand who you are and where you came from. And I think that's really, really important, because sometimes we only see this teeny little bit of somebody's story and we don't understand that. And not that it's any of our business, but it helps to understand your heart and where you saw God moving and how you developed that relationship. I think that's really valuable.
Oh, great. Thanks. Good.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. So go ahead and share the other experience that you've pondered on.
Well, this experience happened when my youngest boy, Jake, he had just barely turned 16 a week before. And it was December 23rd. And I'm laying in bed. My husband's asleep. I'm watching the news. And this great big, so I'm in Utah, which is kind of Western United States. And a great big storm is coming down from Canada, hitting Montana. And they're just saying, man, this is a huge storm and it's going to be bad. And I'm like, yay, we're going to have a white Christmas. And, by the time it gets to here, it's going to be a white Christmas. And just the phone rings, and it's this guy, guy that's kind of almost yelling at me. He's saying, do you know where Kelly is? Now, Kelly is my third child, and she had been in an abusive relationship, and we had helped her get out of that relationship. She was grateful for that. It was a really mentally, emotionally, physically abusive relationship. But and and we thought she was fine. And this guy I'm on the phone with is telling me that she's back with this abuser. That's not why he's calling. The abuser owed him money.
Oh.
He owed him
He didn't care
money.
about Kelly. He just cared
Yeah,
about his money.
yeah. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around, wait a minute, Kelly's back with this guy. How did that happen? What is going on right now? What is happening? And he said, they owe me money, and just ranting about. I said, I don't know where she's at. I don't know I didn't even know she was with him. And so he hangs up, and I get on my knees because I know her life was in danger. And I have a really strong impression she's in Montana. And I thought, I've got to go to Montana. And I can tell you, Sheila, my children will tell you, I am not a helicopter parent. Whatever the reverse of that is me. I am not, I'm like, yeah, they'll figure it out kind of parent. But I felt that. And then I called my friend who was the babysitter for Kelly and Jake their whole lives. And, do you know those kind of friends that you call and they say, I'm there, I'm going, So I told her the situation. She said, I'll get in my car. We'll go wherever in Montana, which Montana, yeah, yeah. And so she calls back and she says, Kathy, I've talked to my husband, and just there's this big storm coming. The roads are they're literally closing the roads. We're not going to get through. We're not going to be able to go and get there. And even to get there was about 12 hours. And I said, I get it. And she said, you're going anyway, aren't you? And I said, I just feel I got to go. I got to find her. And so Jake comes to the door and he said, what's going on? And so I tell Jake, now he's had a driver's license for 1 week. And he says, Mom, I'm going to go with you. And I thought, okay, I can't wake up my husband. I think some women listening will understand this, because he would say, you're out of your mind. You're going somewhere, Montana.
This is his daughter too, right?
No, it's mine. By now we're blended. We're a blended
you're
family.
your second marriage now. Okay.
Yeah. I prayed again, and I felt like Billings. I felt like I should go to Billings, Montana. So I said,
just came into your mind, just
yeah,
Montana?
yeah. So I say to Jake, okay, let's get in the car and go. So I leave a postie on our bed. Call me when you get this. So I tell Jake, we've got to pray for black asphalt roads. You can't drive in the snow. So I just prayed and prayed. I said, Heavenly Father, please, please. I can't drive that far, and he can't drive in snow. So about 4.5, 5 hours from our house is Idaho Falls. And that's where my husband's family was. And by then he had woken up and he said, honey, what are you doing? And I tell him, and I said, I know I can't explain it, but I'm feeling like I need to go to Billings, Montana. And he's like, I am begging you. Can you just sleep in Idaho Falls at my brother's house? Just a few hours, please. The storm, I'm looking at the storm. They're closing the roads anyway. So you're going to, please. So I agreed. We stopped at his brother's house. Jake and I slept for a little bit. We got back on the road. It was still black asphalt. There wasn't snow on the road. We get to Montana. From Utah to Montana, before we get to Montana, this guy calls me again and he said, hey, somebody said they're in Wyoming. They're in Evanston, Wyoming. And I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm going to Billings, Montana, and now they're in Wyoming. Am I just going to go state to state? And I just thought, I believe that I was inspired with Billings. I've got to not change the course and still go there. So you go straight up for about, 8-10 hours to Montana, and then you take a right to go to Billings, and there's these big gates. And luckily the gates are still open, to the road. So Jake and I are on this road, and we arranged a hotel in Billings. We get to Billings and we and we're exhausted.
But you don't even know where to look in Billings. You just know Billings.
No, and it's nighttime, it's dark, and there's just this really gentle snow falling. Now there is snow on both sides of the road. I mean, snow is like 7 feet deep on both. But when we get into Billings, there's kind of this like lovely Christmassy snow falling. We get to the front desk and she says, "Oh, where are you guys from?" And I said, "Utah." And she says, "Oh, not today, huh?" And I says, "No, we've been traveling all through the night and all through the day." And there's this big screen, this big TV screen with the news in the back. And she says, "How did you get through? The roads have been closed for hours." And I can tell you that we were on that road that was closed and we never had snow on the road. It was black asphalt. I don't know how to explain that, but I can tell you that we were protected and were able to drive on a road that had been closed for hours. So I said to Jake, I said, "We need sleep. We need, by now it's late." And so we get up the next morning and now it's Christmas Eve. And I don't know about you, Sheila, but when you call your kids and you tell them you have some money to give them, usually that motivates a call back. So everybody's trying to call Kelly. "Hey, we've got some cash. We want to send it. Where could we send it?" She's not answering anybody's phone call. Nobody's heard from her. We're really worried that he's really, done something. And so we said, "Well, let's start looking at cheap hotels. I don't know. Let's go there." So we go up to a hotel and there's this woman behind the counter that looks like she's pretty tough. She's just tough looking, and I said, "I'm just seeing if my daughter and her boyfriend have checked in." So she looks in the book. She's like, "No." I said, "Okay, thank you." And I go to leave and she said, "Why are you looking for her?" And I said, I think she's in danger. I think she's in danger and I'm just trying to find her. I'm her mom." And she says, "Well, let me go look at the books farther back." And she comes out and she said, "They stayed here 2 weeks ago." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I mean, 2 weeks. Now maybe they're in Wyoming, but they were in Billings, at least we know 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So she says, "I'll call them and tell them they left a wallet in the room." And I said, "Well, they're not gonna answer. I mean, 2 weeks, they're not gonna do anything." And so I thought, if we go to Walmart has a Western Union, and maybe if we go there, we'll see her, and we were telling everybody, if she reaches out, let her know that we're going to send a Western Union money to the Western Union. So we're just kind of wandering around Walmart. It's Christmas Eve now. What are we going to do? And I got an oil change in the car. We're waiting for that. We're wandering. We're hoping we're just going to bump into her in Billings for some reason.
In a random Walmart.
Random Walmart, right? So the car gets done and it's 1:45 now. And
On Christmas Eve.
And I get in the car and I just said, "Jake, I've got to pray again." And I just said, "Heavenly Father, I can't go past noon. I can't do it. I don't know how to do it. I need to hear something by noon. I don't know if I'm supposed to stay in this town or go somewhere else, but I've got to." And that breaking point as a mom where you're just like, I got this far and no farther. And so about 5 to noon, the lady from the hotel calls and says they're coming to pick up the wallet.
Oh, they answered.
They answered her. So now I'm thinking he's got warrants out for his arrest. I don't know the situation at all. So this hotel was kind of shaped in an L shape. Those old one-story crappy hotel things,
Yeah.
And so I park at the Wendy's on the other side of the hotel parking lot. And I told Jake, "Look, if you see them, get Kelly and drive. Go anywhere, just drive. And if Perry comes in to get the wallet, I'll just distract him and I will find you. So you just go. If Kelly comes in to get the wallet, bring the car around and we'll get her."
So you have this whole crazy plan.
Right. I mean, really, Sheila, it was like, and so I go into this little tiny, those little tiny hotel guest areas for the crappy hotels, and I'm thinking, what am I do? I should call the police. So I say to the lady, I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what to do here. I think he's dangerous." And she says, "Oh, honey, I got a 45 behind this desk. I'll blow his blankety blank head off. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Oh my, like, I am just like, what is happening? I'm just having, like, what am I doing? I'm putting my son at risk. I don't know what, if he doesn't come with my daughter, how do I find her? It just, all of these things are flashing through your head. So he's the one that comes in to the little thing. I said, Perry, I just want my daughter. And he runs. He just takes off running. And think about all the prayers that were answered, Sheila. Every prayer I asked was answered, every single one of them. So I go across the parking lot. Kelly's standing there with Jake. She's in shock. Jake has anxiety. He's anxious. He's in shock. And we'd already rescued her once, and so I said, Kelly, get in the car. And she says, no. And it's a testimony that the Lord doesn't mess with agency. And she said, he's changed and I want to be with him. And I hadn't seen that coming. I hadn't seen it coming for a second. Jake he said, Mom, what if she doesn't want to come with us? And it just didn't even enter my mind.
No, you'd think, well, why would she? Because he's a loser and he's a
yeah.
Loser. She's gonna see that we're saving her.
Yes. Yeah. And she's over 18. There's nothing. Now she's mad that I've run him off. So now she said, we've got a place to stay. We're in this single wide trailer. So I get her, we go to her trailer and they don't have a chair.
So did he take off in the car and took off?
Yeah.
And so she wanted you to drive to where they were. Yeah. He took the car, and so I went to their little single wide trailer. And well, you're a good monk. That'd have been like, once you're in the car, honey, we're just going to drive home.
Yeah, I know. She was adamant, and she said, and she told me, if you don't take me back to my trailer, I won't get in the car. So,
well, there's that.
So I saw they had nothing, no, nothing, not a chair, not a table, nothing. And so I bought him a bunch of groceries, and I had to leave. I had to leave her there, and I told her, I said, you call me and I will get you home. The minute you want, call me and I will get you home. And that whole ride home, I just felt the Savior himself holding me, just loving on me and letting me know that he did everything that was in his power to do. And knowing that he was, when his name is the Comforter, and the Comforter, I learned in a whole new meaning that word, because he carried me all the way home. I couldn't even speak. I told Jake, please tell people we found her. She's not coming home, but I can't talk to anyone. I can't, to leave your daughter. And Sheila, you have kids, or
yes, I have a daughter. I couldn't. That would have been the hardest thing.
It was, and I couldn't stay. It's like, what am I supposed to just stay in Montana? It was just, I knew I needed to leave her, but the leaving was heart wrenching, and the Lord just held me. He held me. He held me, and he held me, and he just comforted me. And a couple weeks later, she called and said, Mom, I'm ready. And we got her home, and she hasn't been back in that. She's doing great. She's with a beautiful young man that we love dearly.
Oh, that's awesome.
But at the time, you don't know that. And,
no, you don't.
And it just is a testimony to the prayers that were answered and the agency that we have to allow for.
That's beautiful. Like, to bring both of those things together, that the Lord is with us in all things, but he will not interfere with our agency. That's a hard lesson to learn. And like I say, at the time, you didn't know she was going to be okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was truly beautiful. Kathy, one last question. Why do you think it's important to recognize the hand of God in your life?
I think because it's the only way to receive peace in these troubled days. We are living in troubled times. And for me to remind myself that he's in the details, that the details of our life is so comforting, and it gives me an anchor. And a way forward, even with the challenges of our day.
Thank you. I 100% agree with you. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and chat with me. And it's just been really fun to get to know you, to hear your story. And I really, really do appreciate it.
It was so great to share. I love what you're doing, Sheila. You're a powerful voice. I'm grateful you're doing it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you have an experience where you have seen the hand of God or your higher power in your life, I want to hear about it. Please send an email to Sheila at
beyondcoincidence.com. Have a great day.